Okay, well, good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Julie Shields Rutina, and I'm the Director of College Planning, Education, and Training at MEFA. And this webinar is best practices for counseling students in light of the new state financial aid programs. So we have a terrific panel here, and I have Jennifer Bento-Pinion, who is our Director of K through 12 Services at MEFA, will be behind the scenes monitoring the chat, the Q&A. So if you have anything you want to add to the discussion, questions, whatever, put that in there. And we have a terrific panel. And I will go very quickly because there's so much content, but we have Dr. Clantha McCurdy, who is from the Department of Higher Education, Office of Student Financial Aid, and we have Niall Fuentes from Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We have Robert DESE, who is the director of Gear Up Massachusetts, and we will have Bob Bardwell, who is executive director of MASCA, and also at Framingham High School. So really great panel and lots of good information to share. I'll just add that this is one of our MEFA Institute webinars, and you can receive professional development points for this. So in the follow-up, you'll see how to do that easily for yourself. And if you have to leave, we know how busy your jobs are these days. We will send you the slides and the recording tomorrow. So thank you. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Clantha.
Okay.
Oh,
good morning. Yes, good morning, everyone. And it's my pleasure to be with you this morning. I might have spoken to some of you yesterday, so you might hear some things that I shared this morning from yesterday, but it's just a reminder, right? I'm sharing this time with my three other panelists, so I'm going to be very quick, but give you an overview of some of the important things with state financial aid that's very relevant to the work that you'll be doing with your students and getting them ready for college. And the first thing that I'd like to tell you, if we change the screen here, the slide. Okay, am I changing the slides or is? Oh,
sorry about that. It was.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll give you a prompt. It's that for state financial aid, we are truly focusing on access and affordability. So everything that we do these days with our policies, introduction of new programs is focused around this. And just to show you what that looks like, next slide. It's as we look at affordability, we are looking at providing that through new financial aid offerings. I'm going to talk a little bit today about free community college and also free tuition and fees at our public four-year institutions for low-income students. We also are focused on removing barriers, providing access by removing barriers. And you probably heard about this last year when the state passed the tuition equity law that allowed some students who did not have an ability to access state financial aid and in-state tuition to benefit from that. So more to come on that. We also had some workshops on that last year, and we'll continue that this year as well. In addition to that, we are providing outreach to students who are outside of our traditional age, outside of the 18 to 22 age, focusing on students through adult learners through our Mass Reconnect program. But also, I just want to mention the early college programs that have been really, I guess, I want to say important, but popular. And more schools around the state are looking to partner with our institutions to offer these early college programs, which have been awesome, having students graduate from high school with an associate's degree or very close to that. So if we move on, I'd like to mention a little bit about the tuition equity law. And this is one significant way that we've moved the needle, providing a pathway for in-state tuition and access to state financial aid for certain non-US citizen students who you know in your schools who are considered undocumented or who have other things to do to receive citizenship status. And what that requires pretty much is spending at least 3 years in a Massachusetts high school and earning a high school diploma or the equivalent. And someone has asked, does it have to be consecutive years? No, it does not have to be. And we've even gone as far as to say if a student completed, let's say, 3/4 of a year, we are being flexible and acknowledging that as a year. So if you have students that you question whether or not they would meet the eligibility criteria, just reach out to our office and we can help with that. Along with that, as we know, undocumented students or students who do not meet certain citizenship statuses are not able to complete the FAFSA, or at least they can complete it, but it will not result in last year an EFC and this year's student aid index. So the Department of Higher Education worked with Regent Education to develop a state financial aid application, and we call it the MASFA, which stands for Massachusetts Application for State Financial Aid. We launched that last January for the last academic year, 2023-24, and your students were able to complete that and gain access to financial aid. This application was available in March this past year, right about the time that the FAFSA was coming out of all of the challenges. But these students were able to complete that application last year as well. And we expect to be right on target for 25-26 with the full launch of the MASFA as the FAFSA is launched, I think fully. We are hearing December 1st. So early December is what I will say. Last year, we had about 500 students to complete the MASFA application. And for the 24-25, this current academic year, just under 1,600 students, but students can still submit that if they desire to access financial aid. And for some students, it may be that they completed, had some incomplete application statuses. Certainly you or the financial aid office can work with the state's financial aid office to clear those statuses. So good news with that application, and we are very happy that it's available and continue to tweak it to make that student experience as smooth as possible. So if we move on, the exciting news is the amount of money that we have received for state financial aid. I've been around for many, many years and never would I have ever thought that we'd be where we are right now. We've essentially added $200 million to state financial aid since FY23, and that is so awesome. And it has allowed us to provide the opportunities that we will discuss. But if we were to put up a graph that would go back a few years, trust me, it would be very minimal because there were days or years when we only had maybe $95 million in state financial aid. And right now we're hovering just below 400 million. So we're doing some awesome things in Massachusetts. So what does that mean for students? If we look then at information that you probably need to share with students and be aware of, if we switch to the next slide. Free community college. That's become the buzzword for this year, and it will be in the future. Fully implemented free community college during this academic year. We, through 2 programs, MassReconnect, which supports students who are age 25 and older. And that's where, when I talked earlier about reaching out to non-traditional age students, but for MassReconnect, income is not a factor, and that's something that you need to keep in mind. And then this year, MassEducate, which is the broader funded component of free community college. This supports students of all ages. Income, of course, is not a factor here, but to implement free community college this year, it has just been awesome. Certainly whenever you implement a new program, there are kinks that we work out, and that's mostly on the delivery side with the financial aid officers. But as you are working with your students, And if they are selecting institutions and want to know if they could benefit from this program, I think the important thing is income, not a factor. Completing the FAFSA or the MASCA, yes, that's a must do. So if we look at the very next slide here, what we are saying is under free community college, the MassEducate component, it is known as the Commonwealth's Free Community College Program, designed specifically to provide financial assistance for full and part-time students who are enrolled in and pursuing an approved program of study. And that could be a certificate program or an associate's degree. It's a last dollar scholarship grant. I always say scholarship. It's a last dollar grant, which means that in awarding students, the colleges will consider if those students qualify for other non-loan aid, such as Pell Grant and a MASCGrant or any other federal, state, or institutional programs. And at that point, they're looking at how much that student's tuition and fee costs are, and minus the non-loan aid, and that will equal their MassEducate award. So under this program, and if we go to the next slide, for Mass Reconnect, pretty much the same thing, last dollar, but this program is geared to community college students who are age 25 and over. So in calculating the eligibility, the campuses will look at tuition fee costs minus the other non-loan aid, and that's going to equal their award under MassEducate. So obviously, students who are not qualifying for some of the major need-based programs, such as a MassGrant or Pell Grant, may receive a larger award under this program. But that's how it is designed. It's designed, we can provide this free community college because we are able to consider other aid that a student will get. So those are the two programs that support free community college. Does not mean that students are not participating in other programs. It's just how we make up the resources to provide that to students. If we take a look at the next slide, I like to do kind of a show and tell. When the free community college was announced this past fall, early in the fall, it was announced by the governor, and you see Governor Healy there, who's flanked by her lieutenant governor, the secretary of ed, the commissioner of higher ed, and on the opposite side, key legislators who were involved in creating this program, Representative Cumberford and Senator Spilka, along with some student representatives who were able to, on this particular day, talk about what this meant for them. So it's always good to connect students with these. And I love the fact that Governor Healy promotes these initiatives to bring about more awareness. So if we take a look at the next slide, I mentioned last dollar scholarships, that this program provides free tuition and fees, full-time and part-time students, which means a minimum of 6 credits. But the other good news is that there's also a book and supply allowance up to $1,200 for students who participate in free community college. And you might consider this a bonus, but for students who meet certain income thresholds, there is an additional allowance for other educational costs that could range up to another $1,200. So we list here for your purpose other income thresholds. And I think rather than focusing on what that income would be, I think broadly, students who are eligible will meet this eligibility for that additional book allowance. So we are making strides with this. And I think as we look at financial aid policy, hopefully in the future, we could move beyond tuition fees, book and supplies to covering a greater part of the student's cost of attendance here. So as we look at that and moving on to making college more affordable, if we move beyond the 2-year institutions into our 4-year institutions, and we are focused on the public college sector, there are other opportunities for students who would like to attend a 4-year state university or state college. And this would be the 9 state universities, which includes Mass College of Art, Mass College of Liberal Arts, and the 4 UMass campuses. So what's available for them? Let's look at the next slide. And that brings us then to the MassGrant Plus program. I'm sure you've been reading in the news lately the wonderful opportunities that our public four-year institutions are announcing, UMass campuses, and now the state universities. As a matter of fact, UMass Boston mentioned their, I think they call it the Boston Promise or Beacon Promise program. Everyone has a name for their program, but essentially what they're doing is partnering with the Department of Higher Ed through the resources that we are offering from the state level, assuring that these students will benefit from free tuition and fees at their institution. Also, under MassGrant Plus, it allows a $1,200 book allowance for students. And the important thing is this program is focused on Pell eligible students. So you might say, well, what if I'm not Pell eligible? Well, we'll get to that in just a second. But if we go to the next slide here, just continuing on that, this MassGrant Plus is also offered as a last dollar grant, and it is awarded after all other non-loan aid is considered full and part-time Pell eligible students. And of course, completing the FAFSA or MASFA is very important. We generally indicate that for the FAFSA, students should be mindful of their institution's deadline for financial aid for both FAFSA and MASFA, and that assures that they will be considered for the best financial aid package possible. Often, though, we advertise a May 1 deadline for the MassGrant program, and sometimes the legislature will come back when they complete their budget for the next year with maybe another deadline. And all of these things that, we will continue to push back as we did last year when under, a couple of years ago under COVID, we moved the deadline for MassGrant from May 1st to July 1st. And then just this past year with all of the complications with completing the FAFSA, that deadline was moved initially to July 1 and then August 1. So MassGrant Plus for Pell eligible students at our four-year institutions, public institutions. And then if we go to the next slide, what if you're not Pell eligible? Well, we have an app for that too, and it is called MassGrant Plus Expansion. It is also a last dollar grant that awards up to half of resources to meet the students' tuition and fees. So unlike MassGrant Plus, this is a program for students who do not qualify for Pell Grant, but they meet the income threshold, which basically ranges up around $100,000. But important to note that it's a student aid index now of about 15,000. That's as close as we can get to where this threshold cuts off. And it is something that, you might be mindful of as you are working with your students on this. So the only thing is under MassGrant Plus Expansion for four-year institutions, the student must be full-time. But under MassGrant Plus, as I mentioned, it's full and part-time. And students are encouraged to complete the MASCA and FAFSA as quick as they can, making certain that they are first meeting the institution's deadline. And I assure you, if you meet the institution's deadline, then the student will meet any state deadline that we publish. So if we move on, lastly, I'm going to just kind of wrap up very quickly because I'm not going into detail on these programs, but I want to remind you that in addition to the free community college and the MassGrant Plus Expansion, which helps students to have sufficient resources for tuition fees and books and supplies, the programs that you've always known us to offer are continuing. First is that MassGrant, which is the state's primary need-based program. This is where you'll always see that May 1st deadline for students to complete their FAFSA or their MASFA. And MassGrant is allocated directly by the Office of Student Financial Aid, but there are other programs that we list here that are allocated to the institutions, and they award those funds to students. Some of these include the Cash Grant Program, a new in-demand scholarship program that was implemented last year, all of the tuition waivers will continue, such as your Adams, your Coppet Certificate of Mastery, the need-based tuition waivers. And then there was a high demand scholarship that we've had for several years, but because of federal funding, we were able to offer that scholarship to public and private college students this past year and again this year. And of course, that's focused on our workforce. And we fund students who are enrolled in college majors that meet the workforce demand. But other programs, the ECE Educator Scholarship, Paraprofessional Teacher Grant, and of course the Gilbert Grant, which is totally focused on Mass residents who attend our private institutions. I'm going to end with this because I know that we will have an opportunity to come back to you with future workshops, those that we're partnering with MEFA on and others throughout the year as we start to ramp up our information and training on the MASFA and other state initiatives. But I'll pause and see if we have any time for questions. Jennifer, you're tracking the time, so let me know or if we need to move on, because I've probably taken more than my time on this.
We do have a couple questions that came in that are
Okay.
really good. So if we could maybe tackle a couple of them.
Okay.
The first one is, if a student has a parent living in another state and claim them on their taxes, are they eligible for these programs?
Okay, a dependent student is considered a resident of the state in which their supporting parent is a resident of. So when students complete the FAFSA or MASFA, if they're listing, and let's stay with the FAFSA, if they're listing that they're a resident of Massachusetts, but their parent is a resident of another state, they're not going to pass the residency issue. And what you have to think about is our state financial aid is based on resources that we all contribute to through our taxes. You know, we pay Massachusetts state tax. And if a parent is living in New York and paying New York state taxes, then as a dependent student, you're going to be looking at New York for your resources. So your parents are not contributing. But our financial aid guidelines require that both the student and the parent be residents of Massachusetts.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next one is, do students need to sign up for MassEducate, or is any student who applies to community college automatically enrolled?
If a student enrolls at a community college, completes that FAFSA, they are automatically considered, and the College Financial Aid Office will determine if it's the MassEducate component, which our students will be those who are under age 25, or if they're going to be funded under MassReconnect. So the student doesn't need to go in and say, hey, I want to be eligible for this. It's an automatic process with financial aid staff awarding students for the year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And then is MASFA only for undocumented students?
No, there are certain other classifications that are listed there, and I tend not to get into that. I leave that to the legal side, but we do have a tuition equity webpage that lists more information. For now, if you just simply go to www.mass.edu, put in the search tuition equity, it's going to bring you to that landing page with all of this detailed information. I did not think I should get into that right now, but we will have future workshops and we'll have members of our legal team there who can answer all of these related questions. The other thing is we continue to partner with stakeholders who are working with this population, making sure that they have access to that information. And the other thing I'll state quickly about the MASFA is that it is available in English and Spanish.
That's great. Okay, two more quick ones here, and
Okay.
these are in regards to MassGrant Plus. Is the $1,200 annual or total?
It is a total annual award. So, and we look at MassGrant Plus for, excuse me, fall and spring semester. If a student happens to take summer courses and the institution has available funds, they may extend a book and supply allowance for that. But the program is funded around 2 traditional academic semesters. So a student full-time would receive $600 for fall, let's say, and $600 for spring. And if they're part-time, it's half that.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll move along. We're probably good for time.
Okay.
But thank you.
Sure.
Julie, I'll let you decide how we pivot from here.
Great. So we'll have Niall go next, and then yeah, I think those last three, you're good. Thank you.
All right. Hi, folks. Can you hear me okay? Niall Fuentes, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and I'm really here to talk about undermatching in a way that we're making sure that all kids are having the opportunity that they want to be successful. I think, and just so you know, I'm a community college graduate before I fall down. So I feel very highly about community colleges. One of the things we're really focusing on in my office, College Career and Technical Education, is focusing on equity and access and making sure that kids have access to what they want to do. I think a lot of parents, and you might have heard this as well, the big headline is free community college, right? Tuition free, fee free community college. And that is very attractive to a lot of our families. What I think a lot of families don't know is that this other part that Clantha was talking about, this MassGrant and MassGrant expansion, where actually 4-year colleges are very affordable, particularly for low income families and low middle income families to attend. So one of the conversations we have, and I'm going to do the data piece of this. If I start talking about chronic absenteeism for some reason, it's just yesterday was all chronic absentee data. So just check me on that. But I really wanted to go over kind of some FAFSA data and some college attendance data so we can kind of take a look at where there might be kids that are undermatching. And again, community colleges can have great certificate programs, transfer programs, or, particularly for kids in career technical education who just want to like hone some skills and get the certificate they need to be successful in the workforce. So this is not to say that kids should not go to community college. In fact, this kid did. So I just want to make sure people put that out there. There's a lot of different reasons kids choose where to go. You know this, most of you are school counselors. But we want to make sure that the decision isn't made because of economics, meaning college affordability versus family economics, which can be a whole different thing. So can we move on to the first slide? We'll start on about FAFSA. And these are FAFSA completion rates that we have here.
Yep. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
There we go.
I didn't know that if it was just me. So this is FAFSA completion rate. So I wanted to show this one that kind of compares, and I'll show you, we're going to have a future MEFA webinar, if you're a school counselor, how you can see this information for yourself in something called Edwin. We take data from US Department of Education, we match it with SIMS data, and for high school seniors, we create a list of kids who have completed FAFSA this year. We will not have MASFA data in there at all. For a lot of different reasons, including student privacy, and you'll be able to identify students who are undocumented. So we don't want that to happen. We don't want to chill the process or quote out kids on being undocumented, although many of you know who those students are and hopefully are assisting them to get through this process. So this is FAFSA only. These are matched students. The numbers will be a little bit higher in actuality because there's some students we can't match for different reasons. I'll go over that when we do the other webinar with Julie et al. So this is kind of an idea. I want to show you kind of longitudinally. Again, this is available in our Edwin tool if you want to look at the aggregate, and sorry, our DART tool if you want to look at the aggregate, and our Edwin tool if you want to look at student level type information for your district. And you'll see we've seen a constant kind of decrease in students completing FAFSA. This has been a nationwide issue. We thought we were kind of recovering a little bit right after COVID, but now we're continuing to go down. And you'll see, particularly for low-income kids, only a little bit over a third of low-income kids are completing FAFSA. So they're locking themselves out of opportunities to go to 2, 4-year and technical colleges when they can't get their funding. Can you go to the next one, please? When we're really looking at equity, we want to look at racial and ethnic equity as well. There was a weird drop in Asian FAFSA completion last year. I don't know why that is, or if people know why that is. They still are among the highest percentage of students who are completing FAFSA, but it has dropped quite a bit. But again, here, if you look at our fastest growing racial ethnic population, which are Latino students, less than a third of Latino students are completing FAFSA. So we have initial, like from jump, an initial kind of college access issue around affordability when we have so few kids who are completing FAFSA, particularly who are Latino. And particularly because Latino students are concentrated in probably like 15 to 20 districts. I mean, Latino kids are everywhere, but large populations, majority minority, if you would, in, kind of a relative handful and maybe footful of districts. Next, please. And I wanted to break it down a little bit. Again, I could have cross-tabbed everything in the world, but we also know that there's a problem with boys completing FAFSA and going to college, and probably along the whole educational continuum where we need to figure out how we're going to serve our boys and young men better. But you'll really see here, I think this is very powerful when we start to look at these numbers and who is actually completing FAFSA. So again, these are kids that are locking themselves out of opportunity for higher education. You'll kind of see some things that might be like, wow, I didn't really know that Black women were completing, FAFSA at about the same rate as white men are, which you wouldn't have thought of, 10 years ago or so, which is great for Black girls, not so much for white boys. So you'll see here, kind of really looking at this and really thinking about what populations do we need to really focus on so we can build equitable outcomes for all of our kids. And again, I put a little footnote here. If you have access to Edwin and you're in a school district, you can look at this information for yourself. Of course, the new information for the new fiscal year will not be available until we actually have kids who have completed FAFSA. So probably mid-December, we'll start having new data around what this looks like. Next, please. So switching over to college attendance and immediate enrollment, this is 2003, which is the last year we have data for. So this is, not this year's graduating class before. This is to give you an idea of the kids who actually graduate and go to college. So these are college goers. And the real reason I want to look at this, and again, if you see the green, that's public 4-year. The orangey type is public 2-year. There are a very, very small number of students go to private 2-year. It's less than 0.2%, so I didn't include it. I think it got subsumed in a different category. But you'll kind of see here, kind of trying to think about this and look where kids are going who actually are going to college. And you'll see, for English learners, obviously, those kids that are going to college, and for Latino kids, over a third, and in case of English learners, almost a half of those students are going to community college. Again, great opportunity if that's what they want. When we're thinking about MyCap and other kind of plans for kids, we want to make sure that we're giving them a list of all of our opportunities. And if it happens to be an economic opportunity, meaning affordability, we need to have a conversation with us about all the different financial aid programs they have, including 4 years. And I'm going to get into a little bit detail in a while. Next, please. This is an idea of all graduates. So this kind of gives you an idea of including those kids who didn't go to college. So that light orangey, is that Mandarin? I don't know if that is. Color, peach color is kids who did not go to college. So again, you'll see this is, we're going to look at another slide here. These are historically marginalized groups these are not race, ethnicity. This is other groups of kids. But you can kind of see this, over half of our low-income kids are not going to college. And that's kind of terrifying to me. And even of those, of additional, the ones that are going to 4 years, if that's a measure in districts, only about a third of our low-income kids graduates are going on to 4-year colleges, which is much lower than other populations. Next, please. Similarly, this is the same thing, but for race, ethnicity. Again, for Latino students, only about 2 out of 5 Latino students are going to college at all. And you'll see, again, a large portion of those are going to 2-year and really thinking about this and really looking at this for your district, thinking about what does it mean for students who are going to 2-year versus 4-year? And are they taking advantage of the opportunities that we need them to have? Or are they undermatching? I think some of our, school counselors say, yeah, you could do this. It's like, miss, my family lives here. And there's a lot of different reasons that kids, don't go to school. But I want to make sure, again, I'm going to keep hitting this on the head. Is it affordability that's the issue? Next, please.
Oh, did I go to?
Did you go to? Is there what? Yeah. Math exceeding expectations. All right. So I wanted to try to pull an MCAS in here because a lot of people say, well, those kids aren't, doing very well in school. So I took exceeding expectations. So these are kids that are pretty high performing at math by the 10th grade, right? So this is on as far as an MCAS score goes. And again, this is exceeding. And you'll see here for Latino students, and this is, again, we see that for Latino students, 17% of the students who are exceeding expectations. So these are kids that are probably really good students. Exceeding expectations is a pretty high bar for kids to go to. And look at the numbers, again, who are not going to a 4-year school compared to other groups. And so it's just something else to look at because people will say, well, they're not getting the grades or whatever. Next slide, please. Similarly, these are meeting and exceeding. So these are kids that are on grade level. And I just wanted to kind of look at this too. Still a gap here. These are kids that are on grade level, probably have a strong numeracy and literacy. and they're still not going to college, particularly Latino kids and low-income kids, at the rates that other students are. So just things to look at in your school to see if there's an equity issue in students attending college and what that might be. And again, there's lots of different reasons, but really dig in and see what it looks like in the cycle of inquiry. Next, please. This one I found really powerful because two or more AP courses, that's a pretty strong student, right? So I wanted to think about this and look at the number of Black and Latino students who are taking 2 AP classes and not going to college at all, and low income. Over a quarter of students who take 2 AP classes are not going to college. So like, what's going on with that? Again, a number of, go to 2 years, usually small. Some of those kids are going to technical programs, etc. Some of these kids are coming out of our career technical education schools, just want to go get that 2-year degree to get some advanced certifications and whatever, and that's great. But really digging into this data on the student level to see, like, do we have equity issues in kids going to school? I find this one to be the most powerful because that's a really, you're talking almost about a third of Latino students who take 2 or more AP courses that are not going to college. Why is that? So I encourage people to really look at their own data and answer those questions and see what's going on. Is that my last slide? Oh, sorry. How you do it yourself? Again, if you're in Edwin, I really strongly encourage you. We're going to share these slides, I assume. The CR 301 really gives you an idea of where your kids went to school. The beauty of that is you can kind of, if you have the right level of access, you can click on a little blue link and it will take you to this bottom report. This is CR 308. And that gives you a kind of list of all those kids. So if Johnny Murphy told you that he went to Dartmouth and you really went to UMass Dartmouth, you can see that student. You can follow those students for several years throughout their academic career to see if they graduated, and that type of thing. It is a really great tool for folks to access. It's up to your district to give you the level of access you need. So really dig into that. And then there's a CR 303 report. This one includes kind of the stuff I was talking about: mass core completion, AP course completion, and 10th grade MCAS. Again, I like to look at this because kids who are completing mass core, taking lots of EP courses, and doing well in 10th grade MCAS, they should have an opportunity to go to college. So we're going to make sure that that opportunity is coming to fruition and that they're making choices based on what they want to do and not what the world is telling them to do. And last slide, I think, is next, I think. And the other one is really using Edwin to look at your FAFSA data, which I mentioned in a second ago. And we'll have a webinar that I think in mid-December, Julie, and we'll get word out to that. And this gives you an idea of looking at, I don't know why I put CR 301 in here again. The CR 607 report will give you a list of students in your school and whether they completed FAFSA or not. So come mid-December, late December, you'll have that initial rush of kids who are running. My daughter is a senior and we're going to do FAFSA, even though we're probably not going to be eligible for anything, as soon as possible. But you're really going to be able to keep track over the rest of the school year to see if kids are completing FAFSA or not. So that's my quick presentation on this. I appreciate the time and I will move on unless there's any questions.
No outstanding questions, Niall. Thank you.
Because I was so outstanding?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, one more second. I saw Miss Shula was here from Melrose High School, and anytime I see Miss Shula on my list, I have to say, acknowledge her and give her credit for saving one of my daughters and helping my other daughter to get through. And she really exemplifies the work that all you school counselors do. And I just like to embarrass her in public whenever I possibly can.
Well, thank you. Robert, I'm wondering if you want to just lead us into this discussion. And we hope it really will be a discussion about.
Absolutely, I'll be more than glad to. And Niall, I'm going to tell you, man, every time you present on data, you do it in such a way it just resonates deeply with me. And that matching, adding that data with regard to the 10th grade MCAS scores really drove it home. So thank you for that. I'm Robert DESE. I'm director of Gear Up Massachusetts, and I represent Gear Up College and Career Readiness, very similar to and your town churches. Some of you might even have programs like One Goal, Springfield Promise. So I represent a college access things, and we usually sit aside alongside of you and work with you, school counselors, to really just make sure all of this are getting access to a lot of the opportunities, such as college visits, helping out with SAT and some other things. So we're really going to build discussion, really engage you around how can we best help our students with regards to all these incredible financial opportunities to come along in a very short period of time. A lot of the discussions I've had with your counselors in many of the districts, Springfield, New Bedford, Worcester, Lowell, we've just been talking about what does this mean with regards to how we counsel families and students about making decisions. Now talk about matching, and we want to make sure that students are seeing the incredible opportunity they have.
Oops.
Lose Robert?
We lost Robert. Oh, here he comes. That's good.
I'm back. My apologies. My internet was doing great until I had to talk. So hopefully that little commercial break didn't last too long. But basically, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut off my camera just in case maybe I'll cut down on the bandwidth. You all know what I look like now. So, but I really want to talk about the pros of all these opportunities: MassEducate, tuition equity law, MassGrant. How do we help? So increasing access, we know that's one of the benefits. Doors open that were previously not available and positive impact on workforce development and economic growth. We know these are all the pros of these new policies that have come along and all the funding. We can go to the next one, please. And yeah, here we go. And some of the columns, maybe more information to keep track of. And we know that one of the things that we've been focused with MEFA on and DESE and DT is making sure we understand the distinction between the MassEducate, Mass Reconnect, and making sure we're well versed with all the nuances that come along with that. The good news is there's so much new opportunity. The challenge is we've got to stay up and really get familiar with it quickly. The likelihood of student matching. We're going to have a scenario shortly, which is one that my team has really been using sort of as a way for us to engage in conversation around how do we ensure that with these great opportunities around financial access, to just make sure we're still not shortcutting or allowing students to shortcut an institution that might be the best fit for them. Confusion and misinformation. We make sure that we're accurate and the students are getting accurate information and not relying on unreliable sources. And then limited course offering or closed enrollments. We know that can be a challenge also. So we'll keep on going. Next slide. This is our scenario. And Julie, after I read it, and many of you can read it, but I think I'll read it out loud. But after, we might even want to stop the screen share and maybe be able to see each other, because I really want to just popcorn it and have a little discussion and get your input. So here's what we're talking about when we talk about Josefina's bid is our study. So she's a high achieving high school senior with a strong academic, and she's struggling to make a decision, not unlike I'm sure many of the students that are coming into your office and you're working with now. She's been accepted to a prestigious private university with a significant scholarship offer, but she's also eligible for MassEducate at the local community college, cover tuition, books, fees. Plus you get that $1,200 for extra expenses. And then Clantha mentioned she may be eligible for that additional $1,200. So this is her dilemma. She's trying to make a decision. She's in front of you. Her parents are probably around helping her, guide her on this conversation. But then the next slide, before we go to the conversation, is I think we have two guiding questions. Number one, what questions would you ask her to clarify her decision? We know this is a scenario. You don't have all the information to make a clear decision. So we want to guide you or have a guided conversation around what questions would you ask her to clarify her decision? And then what other information might help in helping her come to some conclusions and get clarity. So what questions would you ask her, and what additional information would you want? At this point, I'd love to stop screen share and see if there are folks want to popcorn in or have think is representative of the conversation you're probably having with students now as they get more and more familiar with MassEducate.
That's great. And Jennifer, you can see if any questions come in and we can start a discussion around them. Yeah.
I was
and
on,
you are
sorry.
muted.
Here we go. Yes, we do have a couple. This one is in regards to the Adams and Copeland Scholarship. So in light of the changes,
Oh, Jennifer, do you mind if I interrupt for one
oh,
sec?
sure. Oh, yep.
Do you want to maybe just pick the ones maybe about the questions, you know, the Josephina questions, and then we'll go back at the end and do the others. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, let's see. Which are those?
Well, so I see someone said, I'd want to know the total debt
Oh,
she would have after the
Yeah.
private
Right.
4-year college.
You got it. I'll just chime in and then add the other panelists and other folks say it. That's a great question because we left it's relatively vague. And again, just like as you're counseling your students, oftentimes you don't have all the information when they're sitting in front of you, but that's a great question. She had a significant scholarship at that private institution, but we didn't have any specific dollars. So for you to say, hey, I'd really want to know what's the show me the money, so to speak, of that prestigious university. That makes perfect sense before making a final decision. So thank you.
all right. We didn't have any others in regards to Josephina.
That is perfectly fine with us. We
Hi.
hope that helped a little bit, and we look
All right.
forward to having further conversation around, again, all these tremendous opportunities financially, and again, how we can work collectively to make sure we're continuing to make sure our students get the best match for higher education for themselves. Thank you.
Great. And I did just see, someone did mention just now, asking Josefina what her career plan is and whether it requires a 4-year degree, then, you know, thinking about the transfer piece.
Spot on. Love it. Great feedback. Thank you.
And someone else mentioned, if her career plan is going to include graduate school, maybe even being more sensitive to the debt.
Absolutely.
All right. So, but you're right, Jennifer, there are still some great overarching questions for the webinar. So maybe we'll just open it up to everything and ask a few questions of the panel. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll start from the top here. All right. One came in. Do you anticipate any changes to the Adams and Copeland criteria in light of the MCAS question? Samantha?
So at this point, we have not engaged DESE in the conversation. I think we will follow their lead to see, as I understand it, the MCAS will still be available. And so if it's available and it makes sense that we can still continue the tuition waiver that's offered under that. It's just that it's not a graduation requirement, right? So there may be a decision made later, but right now, I think it's business as usual.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
Clantha,
you.
if I may,
Yes,
MCAS isn't
please.
going anywhere. I mean, there might be an MCAS 3 or revisions to MCAS, but it is still required in grades 3 through 8, as well as in grade 10 for our state and our federal accountability systems. So it will still exist. So, and we're not going to give too much about, there's still, the law goes into effect December 5th around the competency determination, and there'll be further guidance around that from both the department, executive office, governor's office, and probably the legislature eventually after all as well, all is said and done. But the MCAS will still be there. 10th graders will still take it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Niall. Let's see. So a couple around the MASFA. I think you covered this, but do you need to complete the FAFSA and MASFA in order to receive money for state financial aid?
Yes, the student will need to complete one or the other. In fact, as you look at state financial aid, I can't think of any program that does not require a FAFSA or MASFA, right? Even some of the tuition waiver programs like public service or the DCF programs and Adams, Copeland, they all require that. So it's very consistent. And it makes it easier for our campuses to assist students. They're not having to look at 2 different systems, things like that. So it's very helpful. And we can use the data that we receive from both of those applications. for future policy initiatives.
And if I can chime in here,
Mhm.
because I've heard this now from a lot of counselors and families, actually, even,
Yeah.
you know, when I'm out at the supermarket or something. So I think this is something we can all be aware of, that we want to communicate well. I think sometimes people, now that they're seeing this new MASFA form, they're asking, do people have to fill out both? So I just want to make sure that it's one or the other, and either one will get you to those state aid programs. But I know yesterday we got that question too, Clint. People thinking maybe they had to do both, so you don't do both.
No,
Yeah,
the other.
great.
Although we have had some students to do both. And what happens is then the financial aid office has to determine which one is appropriate. So, you know, and if the
Yes.
student reads the questions appropriately on the MASFA, we do ask questions up front. And depending on how they answer there, we'll say, you should complete the FAFSA and not the MASFA. So if they're reading carefully, they'll get to the right one. But, you know, I think with so many issues last year, people just wanted to have an application there. So.
I know.
And then just, I think one final question, and it's more the process of filling out the MASFA. Clantha, what would be the best direction that you could give someone, just like finding the web page, or is there something we could share just outlining the process?
Yes, students are needing to go into a web portal, student web portal, and they can get to that from our website. I think at the mass.edu website, they can put in the search MASFA and it will take them to that page. But like yesterday, I promised to provide the exact link, and I'll send that over to you guys so that when you share this PowerPoint, those websites are there, or the links are there. But it does go directly into our MASFA portal for students. So they set up an account and then move on to complete the application.
Great, thank you. And it doesn't look like we have any open questions.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank you all for sharing this great information, and thank you to everyone participating. And yeah, hopefully it will be a good year getting students to take advantage of all of these programs. So thank you.
Julie.
Great.
Everyone
Thanks,
have a great
Thank you.
day.
Have a great weekend.
Everyone, see y'all. Bye.
Bye. Okay,
Thank you.
another one. No, that was good. Another feather in your cap, Julie.
Oh, and yours.
Listen, I just want to share. I actually think part of the issue, as we were talking earlier, and sometimes I vent, but I just think that there are too many cooks in the kitchen and too many people who aren't aware of what we've done, and they think they need to start back, or we're not doing something. We should just take time to listen. And just because you wear the communications hat doesn't mean that your way is the right way, right? You guys, if it were not for MEFA, we'd be no place, because we had no money to do anything. And we were on your coattail, and you carried us along, and you continue to do that. So I will try to make certain that that point is made, but and then make it when we're in those meetings, right? Because at this point, doesn't matter what I say, I should just go ahead and come out with it and just say it, because we have a small budget now, and anything that they spend is going to come from financial aid, but it's not all that great, right? So we need to be working with you instead of thinking that we can do this. We don't have the staff. You know,
Right.
if you go out with all these ads, how are we going to address all of those issues at all, right? So it's been very frustrating for me and my team, you know, but you just have new players. And
Yeah.
you have,
And my comments certainly weren't directed at you, and actually
I
not
know
directed
that.
at Robert or Niall either, you know.
No, I know that it's
just wanting them to carry it. Yeah.
I think they get it, because we were all together, working together before we were taken over. We're having a, what do you call it? What kind of takeover is not, it's not a friendly takeover. But I thought that some of that might subside with people moving around and leaving. And I think we just got to get that other team. But they're just, I don't know, they just don't, they're not blending well with what we've been doing. So, and maybe we need to have an outside meeting so that we're all on the same front, and then, you know, but certainly appreciate the work that MEFA is doing. So,
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay.
And I'll see you very soon.
yeah, very soon. All right, Julie, take care.
Bye.
Bye.